Welcome to another episode of Worldie Unboxed, the Founders Edition. This week, Aaron and I sit down with Orri Bogdan, the visionary founder of VAE Labs, a groundbreaking caffeine spray startup. Join us as we explore Orri's journey in creating VAE Labs and his innovative approach to consumer education. We'll dive into the world of esports and uncover Orri's long-term vision for the company. In the second half of the episode, Aaron and I will break down the major takeaways from our conversation with Orri and try to provide insights and practical advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. Stay connected with Worldie by joining our community at worldiebrand.com for exclusive updates and insights. And don't forget to subscribe to the Worldie YouTube channel for clips of our conversations with our guest. All right, let's talk to Orri.
And what's your background? Do you have a background in anything related to your industry or your business or no?
My co-founders have a background in neuroscience and chemistry.
Okay.
I have a bit of a background in like ecom, but mostly I'd say what's more like I studied philosophy in college, so like not really related to what I'm doing. I did that because I was trying to be a pro League of Legends player. I was like, I don't know if you play League, but I was like top 50 in the world in North America for like 3 or 4 years. I held that, which is tough. It's called like Challenger. And I was very close to going pro, but then I didn't end up. I was 22 when I stopped trying, because at that point people were calling me old for like trying to go pro, which is funny. It's not really considered super old nowadays, but like I'm 27. 5 years ago when I was 22, it was considered pretty old for a pro gamer. So having not already had success, I realized I didn't really have much time left. So I quit around then.
What's that process like in terms of trying to go pro? Just going to tournaments and stuff, like amateur
Uh,
tournaments?
Honestly, it's like networking is a lot of it. Like it's like you have to like be really good, but then like also network. And like, so in League you could do duo queue or solo queue. So I would like duo with like top players who are on teams, and then they would like recommend me for like scrims to like sub for their, because I was a jungler. So like, there's 5 roles. I was playing jungle, so I'd sub for their jungler whenever I could, or like, for one of the teams. And if I like stood out, then the coaches like would reach out to me and like, want to watch my VODs or whatever. Um, so that was how it was for me. And then I basically just like subbed in for a lot of players. The farthest I got was I had like an offer to like leave college and go for like a split, which is like 4 months, be a sub for like a pro team. And I would have like lived in LA and stuff, and like had housing and whatever. But I was at that point older, and the guy I was competing with was like 17. I was 22, and like he had so much potential. Like he'd shit on me so much in like solo queue. So I just knew I didn't really have a chance against him. So he ended up being the MVP like the next year of the whole season, like the whole league. And he like is like a really, really, really good player. So I just realized like I had a really tough competition. There's no point. And yeah, that was kind of when I stopped. But yeah, the process was, it's very like there's no like clear process, because it's just like a new kind of thing.
Yeah, it seems like in the last 5 years, there's a lot more kind of like opportunity for that and more of a clear pipeline to professional. Because there's like college teams and stuff now too.
I got invited to a bunch of college teams too. Everyone
Yeah,
wanted me to play for their college team, but it was stupid because I was at a really good, I went to McGill, which is like the best Canadian university,
yeah.
the highest ranked. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to go to some random US college. It doesn't make sense. Like, so the pipeline's clear, but the outlook's not great right now, because like esports outlook isn't really good. So it's like people were making millions per year in the past few years, but those contracts, from what I've heard, have gone down. And also a lot of players who are really talented just never make it for
Mhm.
whatever reason. And it's it's pretty a common thing where like you see someone you think is going to go really far, and they play like one split or no splits, and they only play like academy, and then just like, kind of peter out. So I don't know. It's a tough. I think the industry needs a lot of like development first, and like also League of Legends is kind of like, I don't think it's actually going to like last as a dominant game for very long. So I think it was just kind of unfortunate how it was. But I like competitiveness, so like that's why I like it. And I think for me, like startups is also very competitive. Like I'm competing with myself, which is also what League is. Like you're constantly like trying to do better than your last game. So I think that mentality is pretty good for like wherever you're trying to go into.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because both of our backgrounds, me and Brandon, we were both athletes, and we talked to a lot of athletes, and they basically say, being competitive, striving to get better every day, these things that they really help with business. But I was curious if you're going to say the same thing about gaming, but it sounds like
I think
that's
I think esports athletes are better primed for business than regular athletes
why do you say,
because
why do you say that?
usually we're more technical. A lot of esports athletes like study comp sci or engineering on the side as well. So like a lot. Um, there's a lot of strategy that comes into it that's completely due to like there's no genetic factors. Like me being short or tall has no effect on anything, or fat or whatever. Like you can be it doesn't matter. It just matters what you're how quick you're reacting, how far ahead you're thinking about things. And obviously that there's like, reaction time and stuff is like important for real life sports too, but the genetic factor I think like evens the playing field a lot. So you have to really stand out to like be one of the best. I was playing like 10, 12 hours a day during college. I never went to class. Like I literally never went to class. I had like a 2.6 or 2.7 GPA. And like I literally I was so committed to going pro. I think and I've seen other I've seen basic what was it poker players become like really good VCs. It's like a common trope where like for some reason they just like transfer over really well. I think the same concept applies for esports players. The pool is a lot smaller and like they don't have the same amount of like crazy money that like an NBA player does. Because it's so much more recent. So like it's not as obvious. But I'm convinced that esports players are like the perfect personality for becoming CEOs.
Gotcha. And are you the CEO of your company, or do you have some other role?
I'm CEO. I didn't start. I was COO until 2020 early 2022, and then because like it was the titles are kind of meaningless at that point. But
Yeah.
my co-founder who was CEO went back to law school. We'd failed our production run, and then in order to fundraise, like I had to be CEO. I wasn't planning on being public facing or CEO at all, because like it wasn't my. I was very happy to be COO and like kind of just to be in the background, but it was kind of out of necessity. And then I ended up, I think, being really good at it and liking it. So now I like being CEO, but yeah, it was not like that at the start.
Yeah. And just to take a step back, can you describe, because I took a look at your website. I've seen some of your posts on LinkedIn and stuff, but can you just describe what the product is that you guys sell?
Yeah, so it's a caffeinated breath spray. Our technology is that we developed a way to make caffeine more soluble in liquids. So as a result, normally in a spray volume of our size, you'd only get a maximum of around 2 milligrams of caffeine per spray, which is basically non-functional. But with our current formulation, we're doing 10 times that. So we do 20 milligrams of caffeine per spray, or about 3 sprays for a small cup of coffee. So that's what differentiates us. For everyone else, it would take 30 sprays to get that same small cup of coffee. Ours is a lot more convenient as like just taking 3 sprays. We have a patent pending on that formulation. And then compared to like energy drinks or coffee, the benefits are that it's super easy to carry around. It works about 5 times as fast. So like think like in a few minutes rather than like an hour. And it's super easy to dose. So like if you want to, let's say you're going to the gym and you don't want to chug pre-workout, you can just take a couple sprays. And then when you're in the gym, if you start getting tired again, you can again take a couple of sprays and it works faster. So it works as both a pre and a mid workout. Same concept like athletes too. Like if they want to like get energized mid game faster, get more focused, we use some stuff in there like L-tyrosine, L-theanine to increase focus and reduce jitters. So it's really good for just generally like gym goers and athletes.
And how did you originally get the idea?
We were basically just going to class in the early morning and being we always do worse in our early morning classes. We weren't able to like stay alert, especially if we didn't like have time for a coffee, because my whole team, we all like have a coffee in the morning. Um, so we wanted to create something that was more convenient. We were already looking at other neurotech stuff like EDG and TDCS machines, but we were like college students, so we knew we weren't going to get funded for anything too complex. So we wanted to do something bootstrapped, and we realized that caffeine sprays like theoretically would be one of the best ways to get like efficient caffeine or energy, but there was that huge blockage of it, just like the natural solubility of caffeine being too low. So rather than seeing that as like a barrier, we saw that as an opportunity where if we were able to find a way to increase the solubility of caffeine, we'd have like a real competitive advantage in the space and kind of like create the first functional caffeine spray, which is ultimately what we ended up doing.
And what was that? Can you just describe kind of like the R&D process and how that looked?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm like like I said, I'm not the technical side of things, but I was watching it happen. Basically, it's just in the kitchen. My co-founder Chaim, he's like the brains behind it. He was just like with chemistry, you just try a bunch of stuff. Like you have a bunch of theories and you just see if it works. So it took them about like a year and a half to develop it. And then I can't obviously go to the details of it, but once we were able to develop it, it started off, we went super, super, like we went, because our formulation, like we have a range, we can go up to like, over 50 times the natural solubility of caffeine. We're at 10 times right now for reference. So we started off way too way too concentrated, and what ends up happening there is caffeine's natural bitterness is already very high. So if you get a super concentrated amount of caffeine, it's just extremely bitter. So that's what it started off as. It was like disgusting. It worked, but it was like super disgusting. And then we basically over the years both worked on making the flavor better, but also found a really good balance where we had the right amount of caffeine per spray, that it was both functional but also tasted good.
And do you think of your company as kind of like a new category of products, or are there
Yeah,
already caffeine sprays
absolutely.
on the... Okay.
There's a pizzazz. So there's one called pizzazz that they don't have protect. So like they do 2 milligrams of caffeine per spray. They're like the exact, like it's a pure example of like what we would look like if we never took a technological or an R&D approach first. They're purely a brand play, and I don't think they're doing very well. But regardless of that, I think the main thing is that our vision with this is to create like the ultimate spray, and we think that's when we know that sprays are more efficient for not only most supplements but also most pharmaceuticals. So our vision is to have pods for every need state you could imagine. So if you want to focus more, we could have like a combo of like caffeine and what we have now, like L-theanine, L-tyrosine. We can have like a more BCAA like focused one for like working out. We can have one with melatonin for sleeping. We can have one where you can get high without hurting your lungs. And that's really the point of it, is we want to incorporate like THC, CBD, melatonin, probiotics, vitamins, and eventually pharmaceuticals all in spray form, with the idea being that it's like with our current product, it's way easier to dose. It works way faster, and most importantly, it's not hurting your lungs, because your only option to have something work fast right now, like if you're taking weed as an example, is to take a bong or a joint, and that's going to hurt your lungs. Or you could do take it like an edible, but then a lot of people green out that way because it takes so long to hit. So this is a really good way to like control your intake and feel it fast, and know how much of whatever you're putting into your body.
So it seems like there's at least some level of education that's required in terms of people understanding why spray is better. Is that easy for people to kind of comprehend, or do you have to do a lot of education to get people to actually understand, okay, this is why a spray is better than smoking something or drinking something or taking a pill or whatever other form of whatever they're taking?
Yeah, we're learning what the most important like educational components are right now. Like the fast acting part, I think is pretty crucial, because people don't necessarily like realize that at the beginning. I think the real value of it is the fact that it's just so easy and like convenient. Like you just have it on hand, and then you can just get like wake up whenever you want to. So I think that's like the real benefit, is just like the convenience of it, even more so than like necessarily just the fast acting part. But we definitely like tested a lot of like different 3-4 word slogans, like understand like what people are understanding and not understanding about the product. That said, we're pretty early still. Like we've done like maybe half a year of online sales in the past year. Not counting the sales we did in 2020. And we're launching in a really big way starting like next month. So we're going to be learning a lot more soon. But that's the current understanding, is that fast acting is a good like way to kind of tell people about it, but the actual benefits is more around just like the ease of use.
And are you guys solely direct to consumer, or are you in retail locations too?
We're going to be in retail. So like right now we're direct to consumer, but we've sold over $500,000 worth of product to our retailer, our distributor partner, without giving an exact number. But yeah, we're going to be in over 1,000 New York stores. He's a really, really good distribution partner. And yeah, he gave us a really good deal. He's very, very like committed to doing this. And he has a lot of access to every store we want to be in New York City. So that, I think we're going to be primarily a retail first approach.
I was going to ask, is it just one store, or it sounds like it's multiple different retailers? Is that right?
He has access to like every single bodega, convenience, and smoke shop in New York.
Okay. So that's basically where you want to be.
Yeah. So yeah, basically what we're doing is a very retail focused approach with trade marketing like first. So we're investing a lot into trade marketing to stand out. So our packaging display cases look really like unique and cool, and they stand out. And in certain areas like a smoke shop, we're able to be in front of counter where we like other nicotine products would not be able to be front of counter. So we have this huge advantage in terms of just like consumers seeing our product. And then also price point wise, at $15 per bottle, it's exactly $1 per coffee. So it's, in a convenience store or bodega, it might be expensive. We'll see. But at a smoke shop, it's not, because you compare it to vapes and they're usually like $30-$40. So we're cheaper than them, and also cheaper than other like liquid caffeine options.
And what does your typical customer look like in terms of like behaviors, age, things like that?
1835 is our best performing demographic. It's a really, really broad audience. So like gym goers, I think, has been our best performing. We definitely have a gym focused brand. But in general, college students really, really like it because they just tend to be more like to try new things. We have like people who are like professional drivers, like Uber drivers or like delivery drivers, because they don't want to go pee all the time. So this is a way to not have to deal with like coffee because it's a lot of water. Um, New parents, nurses. We had a whole troop of policemen order like 50 bottles somewhat recently. Super, like, basically people who are like on, like, need to be alert all like very consistently in their job. This is like a really good option for them. So we've seen a lot of success there, but obviously, again, like, we're still pretty early, so I think we'll have a lot more insights, soon.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess just from a legal perspective, because I know a little bit about supplements and some of the legal headaches that you can get yourself into. Are there any, I guess, like, have you guys had to get lawyers or anything like that
Yeah,
to,
we're working, like, we've done. So the thing with our product is that, like, there's not a lot of regulation or red tape around it because it's caffeine and there's just not, and we're a dietary supplement. So what we do is we self-impose a lot of these regulations, and we kind of like, we make sure to go above and beyond everything just in anticipation of, what could come. So for example, like, there's no age restriction on caffeine, but we only sell 18 plus, and we only use models that like clearly look like 21 plus. So that's something we like self-impose. In terms of our product, the toxic limit for the FDA sets out for caffeine is 1,200 milligrams per day, and we're at 900 milligrams per bottle. So even though it's meant to be used over a week, we're well under that. And then in terms of like the product side, on top of like all the warnings and stuff, and obviously we've consulted with like FDA lawyers and working with an FDA certified facility. We also made it so that our product is a snap-on bottle, which means that unlike most bottles, which are screw on, you can easily take off and on the cap, and then, like, if you wanted to, just down the whole thing. Our bottle is like really, really, really difficult to open, like almost impossible without like really tampering with it like a knife or something. So we did that intentionally to prevent that from happening. And then the last thing we do is a taste dissuasion method, where our bitter blockers actually wear off with continued uses. So if you were to take like 10 to 12 sprays, or like if a kid got his hands on it and started taking 10 to 12 sprays, at that point it would get so bitter that they would like naturally just want to stop.
so if you do too many sprays too quickly, then it basically tastes bad. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we have very strong bitter blockers, but if you do it if you do too many at once, then the bitterness will just really kick in. And because it's literally it's like we're 10 times more concentrated than any other caffeine on earth, so like it is very bitter. You just don't notice it as much with our existing bitter blockers. So when they wear it off, it's very noticeable.
Gotcha. And you mentioned that you at least wanted to bootstrap, but did you bootstrap? And if so, for how long at the beginning?
Yeah, there's like three co-founders. We put in, like, I think 70,000 over like 2 years. And that was like launching our Indiegogo. We also sold 55K so we took in 55K from Indiegogo. And that was really well. That went really, really well because we got a really good return on our ad spend there. The goal was basically, I tried reaching out to funds early, and they had told me, super cool concept, reach out when you have 1 million run rate. And we took that to heart. So like we tried to build up the company first. But what happened is in 2020, our manufacturer told us they couldn't make our bottles after we sold on Indiegogo. So in 2021, we went on the new manufacturer, got the bottles in, and then everything broke. Like we had like pretty much 5,000 bottles leak when we sent them out. So we ran out of money at that point. So we needed to. I didn't really have a choice but to fundraise. And then I got fortunate because I was able to fundraise from a lot of strategics who are like very, very helpful beyond just the money. So I'm very happy with how it went. But yeah, the intention was to, build some leverage and make ourselves attractive to investors. And we got a good deal because like we ended up our first round closed at 8.5 million post money, which is like pretty good given like the economic climate and being, pre-revenue or whatever. But we started off like our first offer is at 3 million post money from our VC, and like we can raise a lot of money on that. So it was important to have leverage. Thankfully, we ended up finding a really good strategic partner that helped us build some leverage. But without that, it would have been really tough. So that was why we wanted to start off bootstrapped.
And what was the process for finding those strategic partners? Were they people who were already in your network, or how did you find them?
Are you hearing the background noise right now? By the way, I can close my door. You're not?
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Hearing it. Somebody close my door. Sorry. So yeah, strategic partners. We found them really because so I'm from Toronto, but we got into an accelerator in Austin, Texas, and all of our investors from Austin, Texas. I met literally every single one there. I was there for 1 month, and I basically went out every single night to different like startup events or whatever. I was constantly going to like CPG events, like my industry. Anything I could do that could potentially get me connected with someone. I tried to meet with all the founders I could in my industry. I asked them to introduce me to people. One of the investors I met was through a founder that I'd never met before, but I got introduced to. I went to the gym with him, and then in the gym was this like 6'8" guy, and he was an investor at Midnight Venture Partners named Brian Springer, and I met him there, and I got his number, and then I told him about our product, and he was really into it. But he told me that like we almost never do like pre-revenue deals, so like keep me in the loop if like anything changes. And I could tell he was super interested. So that was like one person. And then obviously the accelerator was connected to Tim Draper through Draper Associates. So at the end of that program, I got to pitch him. And when we pitched him, he really liked what we were doing. So we ended up getting a second meeting with him. And just on that like second meeting going well, I'd also met someone else. I don't want to say the company he's from, but from a similar, like a multi-billion dollar company that's very similar to us. He was no longer part of it, but I told him, this guy, he was the first employee of this company, basically like the founder. And I told him, hey, like we got this meeting with Tim. I think he's going to invest. Tim ended up making us an offer. I told Ryan from Midnight about it. I told my connection from the other company about it. And at that point, I basically had 3 interested investors, 2 of which were like strategic, because Tim Draper's like his fund's a passive fund. Like they don't like they're from it's like they're not like a active investor. But we had 1 lead investor in Draper Associates, and then another potential lead investor through Midnight Venture Partners, and then my other funds. So I had 3 funds I was kind of negotiating with, 2 of which could actually like be a lead, since the third fund was also an advisor to me. So there's a bit of conflict of interest in terms of him like leading around. So there was a bit of back and forth between the funds. I just wanted to find a way to get all of them in, because I think they all had different value. And then, I was able to drive the valuation up high enough where I was able to get all the funds in, where they all have meaningful stakes. But, I feel like none of us really like won the deal. And that's kind of what I was told about deals, is it's only a fair deal if neither side walks away feeling like they won. I definitely didn't feel like I won. I had a potential 10 million pre-money or up to 12 million post money on the table from another fund at the same time. We closed it at 8.5 post. So like, I definitely feel like I could have done better, but at the same time, like I'm really happy with like where the equity distribution ended up. And like, actually having a really good combination of like Draper as like a potential lead investor, and then the other 2 funds is like value added investors.
Gotcha. And I know you post a lot about kind of some of your experiences with accelerators and VCs. Do you have any recommendations for just kind of like first time founders in terms of navigating that space? Whether to bootstrap, whether to join an accelerator, whether to try to get VC funding as soon as possible, just any kind of high level guidance for first time founders there?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is so like first you have to build up. I made a post kind of outlining the steps, but I think step 1 is essentially like to create something of like legitimate value. So like you have to like, it depends what industry, but in our case we have a patent pending technology for like a real competitive moat. And on top of that, even though we'd failed, we'd gone to market, we'd have a bit of product market fit, like we'd sold $55,000 in a month. So I think getting that like level of like, okay, these guys are serious, and like, this is the right team, like kind of proving that out, and like also proving that you have like a real differentiator in terms of like your product or your unique insight in the market. The less you have in terms of like technology or like differentiation, you need to make up in traction. So you need to have sort of one of those 2 at the least. That's sort of step 1. And then step 2 is to network with other founders, ideally in an adjacent industry, to get small checks. I think it's really good to get small, like $5,000 checks from founders. It's a really good way to like get warm interest to their investors, and also just like have them care about you a little more, because other founders can help a lot. And then I think the biggest unlock is to find, if possible, this is hard, but like in our case, we literally my mentor is the basically first employee. I like to call him the founder, but first employee of a company that like was worth more than $10 billion in like less than 2 years of existence. So like he in an adjacent industry. So it's like he's like the perfect partner. And like I don't think everyone can get yeah, see you, Brandon. I don't think everyone can get that level of partner, but if you can, then I think that person ideally incentivized with like a good deal. In our case, we gave him a deal of 100,000. He gave us $100,000. We gave him 7%. It was almost adjacent to YC. And we did that intentionally because we wanted him to care more about us. We told our other VCs we were doing that, even in negotiation, because I was like, I want him to care. He's such a big value add. So I always suggest like finding an advisor like that and then giving him as good a deal as you can, because they're going to care more. They're going to pay it back. And it's been the case with him. He's been working with us for over a year. I still talk to him like every day. And he's definitely our biggest help.
And then do you guys have employees yet, or is it kind of just the founding team and then some advisors and investors?
We use a lot of contractors, and like we have a lot of business partners, like with our distributor and 3PL and stuff like that. But we don't have any part-time or full-time. A lot of people reach out to me. I think it's important that we hire for need and not just opportunistically. We still haven't raised that much money, so it's like we want to make sure that we are very careful with our hires. We'll probably, ahead of our A round next year, we'll probably look to hire like a VP level for supply chain and for sales, just to help out my co-founders since they're first timers in those areas. But as of now, it's just mostly the founding team and investors.
Yeah. And so we're also thinking about getting into retail. We've started having some like super preliminary conversations there. So I guess what was that process like in terms of finding a distributor, understanding which retail locations to get into, where you're going to be in the store, if they were going to basically like if people are going to be educated on the product and be able to speak to what it is if people ask, like what was that process like?
We talked to a lot of people at like like through our investors that have done this before. Like that was a huge thing. Like one, for example, one of our investors is Max Bauman at Base Makers. Like their whole thing is doing trade marketing really well. So we talked to a lot of people about it, show them what we had prepped up, and then also talk with our distributor. We have a very close relationship with our distributor. My co-founder Mohand is in New Jersey, where our distributor is located, and he like works with them every day. So we have a really tight relationship with them. They guide us a lot in what we're doing. There's obviously a lot of differences, and like like they'll like even like will give us like assets that we just don't like, and like we'll incorporate the stuff that he cares about, but like keep it with our vision and our brand identity and stuff, because we know better than anyone else on that. So we listened a lot to what people are saying. We make a lot of incremental adjustments, but the overall kind of like vision of like how the brand should look and how we present ourselves is from us, and we maintain that while incorporating really good advice as we go into retail.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about brand identity next, because I mean with a consumer company, it's pretty important to have a strong brand, and you want to make a good first impression with customers, but at the same time, like getting high level branding work or like high quality branding work could be super expensive. It could be up to like 50, 100K, maybe even more. So like what was the process for you guys in terms of getting a brand that you felt good about, but that didn't break the bank from day one, and then kind of like iterating and improving upon that?
I spoke with like 5 different branding agencies ranging from 25,000 to 500,000 to work with us. We ended up going with a guy on Upwork and then a guy on Dark Roast, which is like another one like that. I think we paid maybe a total of like 5,000 for our brand work. We had a lot of input on it. We did it that way because we didn't think that the price was worth it for like a big agency, but also because we've been working on this for so long, and like just getting someone who's like creative to like put the visuals there, and then to us to kind of guide beyond that, we felt was the right call. We also just learned a lot through like running some ads on Meta, what kind of people are looking for. So we adjusted our brand with our vision in mind. We kept like the brand essence has been very similar. I'd say it's gone a little bit away from, it used to be like ultra premium, now it's just like regular premium with like more of a sport focus than it used to have. I'd say that's probably been the big shift, and that's just kind of been influenced by our audience and like what they look like. But Yeah, I mean, yeah, the general like brand identity has always been like bold, premium, um, innovative, uh, with a little bit of like, it's kind of a reflection of us in a way. Like I don't know if I post a lot on like LinkedIn and Reddit and stuff, and like I'm very transparent and authentic. Like I really respect people that are like that, so I work to be as upfront as possible with everything I do. Obviously, it ends up being a little blunt, but like, trying to take that general kind of ethos and put it into our brand and having that consistency with like our founding team and like our own personalities, I think has been helpful.
And so you guys have been selling for a decent amount of time now. How do you collect feedback from customers?
So I mean, we've been selling for 6 months online.
Yeah.
It so we don't run many ads anymore. So like we do average like 1 or 2 sales a day, something like that. So most of the people that we're talking to right now are subscribers because our product on the market isn't that good. And I've been pretty open about this too. Like we know that like we launched it as soon as possible, but it was like formulated back in December of 2022. So like the formulations, like we've made a lot of improvements to it since then, also on the bottle and packaging and everything else. So we're not really pushing that product, but we do talk to our subscribers because these are the people that, despite the worst taste, despite the worst product, keep ordering it. We have like over 50 of those, so we've been trying to talk to as many as possible. That's been very helpful. Another thing that we run is we work with student groups. So last semester we worked with a UCLA group. This semester we're working with an MIT group, and I mean either I just get connected to them, they reach out to me, but it's happened the last 2 semesters, and they've been very helpful in like running student panels. Flavor panels is great with students because they're young, so their flavor, like their taste buds are like fresh, or like they can really they're more critical with like taste. So like we get more like I think a more real review. Um, and yeah, we've been working with student groups a lot to test that, both in terms of flavor, and now with MIT group we're going to be testing more on actual use cases and how people are like interacting with the product.
And so you offer both subscriptions and then one-time purchases. Once you are in retail locations, are you going to try to use that first purchase to get people to subscribe, or do you think maybe online is going to be more subscription, in person is going to be more one time? How do you think about the subscription aspect of the business versus like one-time purchase?
We're definitely going to highly incentivize. So right now we want to price test, so we're allowing people to buy like one product and then just have that. But obviously, like in terms of shipping prices, it just doesn't make sense to do that for us, like economically. So we're gonna stop doing that. We're gonna do a minimum of like 3 or 4, or probably 3, to order. We're gonna heavily incentivize subscription. I don't think we're gonna force it, but I think it's really important that we push it hard and incentivize it for our customers, because we want to understand like what the replenishment rate is, and if we need to adjust like the amount of liquid per bottle, for example. Um, so that's I think for online we would push the subscription. I think online primarily though is mostly to learn about our customers. I don't think we're really like a D2C brand. It's possible that we like figure out a way to like do well on TikTok and like get viral at some point, but it hasn't happened yet, and I'm not counting on it. I think primarily like we're really an impulse buy, and our focus is really going to be tracking how we're doing at retail and trying to just constantly improve that. So I think that's where we're going to make 90% of our money.
That makes sense. And then you also mentioned that you guys started off with an Indiegogo. So we're thinking about doing something similar pretty soon. How was that process? How much did you invest in it? How long did it take? Just any recommendations for people like us who are going to do a
Yeah,
crowdfunding campaign?
we spent 10K on the video to do it, and that was a big waste of money. We should have done it ourselves. It was a cool looking video, um, but the people who made the video were insistent on kind of their vision, and like it wasn't the right vision for like Indiegogo. Like they did a good video, but it just wasn't the right one. So I think that hurt us. I think if we just did our video ourselves, we would have saved money and done better. The main thing with Indiegogo is that you want to basically have or Kickstarter, is that you want to have rather than doing like lead gen or trying to like advertise like the normal way, you want to get people into like a Facebook group or a Discord group and have them pay money to reserve like a discount or like an exclusive item or both. And what that does is that if you do that, you can get your conversions from like 1% if you do it typically to like 40 to plus percent. It's obviously like it's harder to get someone to commit, but if they put like $1 to like $100, depending on the price of your product, as like a deposit, it makes them like extremely more likely to, and if they're in a group of other people that have done it, they're way more likely to purchase. So if you look up Launch Boom, they're a Kickstarter company that does exclusively that, and that's really their model. They're good to work with, but like if you wanted to do it yourself, that's essentially what you do, and that's really like the best way to get going on. And you do have to have money to invest in. You can't just like, it's not like how it used to be where it's like, oh, like just launch something and like a lot of companies like will have existing product lines and then just like have a budget behind it and push it and then like use it as like a marketing tool. That's more so what it is now. But if your product works really well for the audience and you have like a budget to go, you can it definitely can be worth it to like get that initial audience. Because I think about 50% of, or maybe 30% of our sales from Indiegogo is through the Indiegogo audience, like organic. And I think on Kickstarter it's like even bigger. So yeah, it's worth doing. Just make sure that you're doing like that method of like putting a deposit in.
So what's I guess what's the incentive or what's the benefit of putting in a deposit versus just waiting and just buying the product kind of like
You
on
give them an extra
pre-order?
discount. You give them an
Okay.
extra discount and you give them like exclusive whatever. And the reason why it's important is that if you get a big, like if you get funded in an hour, like if you put
Yeah.
you want $50,000, you get funded, you can update it with like a banner, funded in under an hour, whatever. It's like it's sort of like a lot of people who are on the fence like have a bandwagon mentality. So you need to like go past your goal really quickly, or
Yeah.
you're gonna struggle to get your goal.
Got it.
So that's the whole point, and that's usually how you can get more like exponential growth.
Gotcha. Any other just tips for first time founders based on your experience?
I mean, there's so many, dude. I don't know. Uh, one of you only one ideally non-technical founder. Ideally, two are technical. At least one co-founder has to be technical. If both are non-technical, it's very difficult. It depends on the industry, obviously, but like it's just if you it's just like having to pay for things all the time is just really shitty as an early stage startup. Networking super important. That's why I mentioned the my other thing I'm doing, Founders Game. I think it's just like it was the biggest unlock for us. Like we had everything. Like we had like neuroscience chemistry degrees from like the top Canadian university, patent pending technology in a huge market. We had all this stuff, but we couldn't raise for 6 months because like we didn't have like no, they're like, you guys don't know what you're doing, and you don't like, we didn't have a network to stand on that. So building that network was really key for me. I did it through a shotgun approach, but I think if you can find like the right communities, and that's why I'm trying to build Founders Game, I think you can really like go a lot farther, a lot faster by knowing the right people. Ideally within your industry, but I also had founders that invested in me in like religious tech, nothing to do with what I'm doing, but they were just like great founders and like were just like really good sounding boards or mentors or like, make good connections for me. So I think there's like a lot of my post on LinkedIn, honestly, like the one that I pinned covers it pretty well, but I think there's a lot of like early steps that people need to kind of cover before they dive into things. And then once they do that and they get those mentors and stuff, they're focused on one thing. That's the way to do it. The other thing that people suggest is like you could try to like, if you have the money to do it, you could try to like launch like two to three businesses at a time, just like through like small amounts of money, just to like test it. Like with like ads and stuff, like $100 per business or whatever. And then if you see that one's like popping off or like getting better results, then you can go more in on that one if you're in terms of if you're having a trouble picking something. But the biggest like problem with starting is just like paralysis and just not starting because you have like idea paralysis. So I think that's one thing you want to avoid, is to make sure just to like figure out which ideas you're really actually interested in and you would actually want to devote like 10 years of your life to, and then test it. And then once you think that that's like the one you want to go with, then you can start taking all those other steps of like trying to find founders to give you $5,000 checks or like a mentor in a similar industry.
And what is kind of like one or two things that you would do differently if you could do things over again?
Like actually nothing, because I think like the failures are really worth it. Like, but like if I still get to get the same investors, but like move things faster, then we made a custom bottle for launch. That's what caused all of our problems on the launch. So I wouldn't have made a custom bottle. I would have kept it more MVP level and just try to sell that rather than trying to sell like the ultimate form on step one. That was pretty crucial. I guess I would talk to more people. Like we talked to a lot of people before we launched, so we did a pretty good job of that. But I think even more would have been useful. And I guess I would have started networking a little earlier because I was a pro gamer until like almost 23. So like if I had started networking just a tiny bit earlier, I probably could have made some more like business focused connections in college. It doesn't matter now. Like I have a really good network and like I have everything I need and I'm really happy with how it ended up. But if I was able to like guarantee that I have everything I have now just earlier, then I would do those things.
And is it pronounced? I should have asked this before, but is it VAE Labs or is it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. So this is a question.
People mess up on that a lot. It's pretty common.
Okay, this is a question we get a lot. It's kind of like, what do you guys, what are your long-term visions? Do you want to would you want to be acquired by Nike? How long do you want to be in the business? Things like that. For you personally, would you want to be acquired by a strategic? Do you want this to be something you do for the long term? Just kind of like in terms of your career, how are you thinking about VAE Labs, entrepreneurship, what's next, all that kind of stuff?
I want to be the CEO of like multiple really big companies, and I think this could be a multi-billion-dollar company, and I want to have other ones like this that I want to be the CEO of. I think my role is very like ultimately it should be high level. Like I shouldn't like obviously in the beginning you have to be in the weeds and do everything, but at the end of the day, like if I'm running multiple companies, I think I can make high level decisions for multiple companies at the same time, sort of like Elon does. Ideally with a lot of control. I think that's a big thing with me. I because my first company, I'm limited in how much say I have there. But my future companies, let's say this one I exit because earlier than I want to because of just like I have to. My investors want me to, whatever. If we were to exit for like $1 billion, I think it'd honestly be bittersweet for me. Even if I become like super rich as a result, like I think this company can be worth like over $10 billion for sure in its ultimate form. Once we get to like our next gen device, start incorporating the need states. But I want to do that with several companies. My main thing is I just want to impact the world in a positive way that I think it should be impacted. And then I also have like non-professional goals. Like I've written like 2.5 books, and I want to turn those into like Netflix series or like a movie or something. So there's like that stuff, sort of like more ego focused, like regardless, like separated from VAE. But in terms of like business, I really want to. I think I have a really good strategic mind, and I'm really good at building community and network around me. And essentially, if I'm able to have really smart technical people to supplement my non-technical skills, I think I could handle several large businesses at the same time. So that's what I'm going for.
Gotcha. And then just super quickly, let's talk about Founders Game. So do you want to just kind of like talk through what that is, what you're working on with that?
Yeah, it's an idea I've had for like a while. Basically, I was in another community called Founders Cafe, and it's more of a service now. But when I joined, it was one of my biggest unlocks for networking. It got me to get it introduced me to my first check in an accelerator, and the one I mentioned in Austin. So it was really crucial for me. But the founder Maddie's now focused more on her own startup, and it's more of like a consulting service now. So I wanted to create a community where we prioritize people and like personality and fit over everything else while keeping an even distribution of pre-seed to series A, B, C, D founders. So like for every pre-seed founder, I want to have someone that's done a lot more so that the later stage guys don't feel like they're just being like attacked with like a bunch of like noob questions. So I started that like I made the community a couple of weeks ago, where you have a ton of applicants for it because I've just been posting on Reddit and getting a couple of viral posts. I pitched to the founder, like Mark Randolph, one of the co-founders of Netflix, on TV, like towards the end of last year. And he's in my community where he's like a mentor of mine. I have other really cool people like Will Knights from IQ Bar, John Coogan, who's a YouTuber from Soylent, now also the founder of Lucy. Both are really good brands. I mean, a lot more. It's probably about 40-ish people right now, with over $1 billion raised. cumulatively. And if you take out the founder of Netflix, well over $500 million raised like without him. So it's like I've gotten really, really top people. Some of them haven't raised anything, by the way. It's just the goal is to get like the most people I really, really like that I think could add a lot of value to the community. And then what I'm trying to do with that is I want to give value to them. So I'm doing monthly pitches to top VCs through my network. I'm going to probably record those and put those on TikTok and stuff to just kind of like show more people what good pitches look like and how it like kind of demystify things. So I think that's a way I can kind of add value to like the world, like the startup world. But besides that, keeping the community really tight and like making sure that everybody is adding value, kicking people out that aren't fits. Like I wanted to have a really active, tight-knit community of founders that I haven't really seen exist. Like there's Hampton, but it seems too pretentious for me. Same thing with like YPO. They just seem very like based on past success and not kind of like predictors of success or like focused on person. It seems like it's more focused on wealth. So I wanted to change that up. I have plans to add up like eventually add a fund and gamify it with like a top 100 leaderboard, which is kind of spurred by my gaming experience. But I think there's a ton of potential in terms of just bringing the brightest people together and helping them raise capital easier, faster for world-changing companies. I think the fund would do extremely well as long as the founder quality is really really well managed. And yeah, I mean that's obviously more long term, but for now it's like looking really good. Got a ton of applicants. You know, I'm being very picky with who I let in. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's got a ton of potential. It's very new, but it's something that's sort of like a nucleus of like all of my networking connections, and now it's growing. And I think it really helps me in terms of just like building on those connections, not just for VAE, but like for myself and like, you know, being able to like give and take more value in the startup world. I think is just an overall value add. So yeah, I'm happy I'm doing it. I told like all my investors about it, and they all like it. That was one thing I want to make sure, like, hey guys, this isn't really like a startup. It's just kind of like it's Discord community. And if it turns into a fund, like hopefully soonish, then great. I mean, I want to back other founders too. I want to help other people out, and I think they deserve it. So yeah, that's sort of the goal with it.
And what is that application and vetting process like? Because I assume if you have a lot of applicants, I would assume that kind of like takes you a while to vet everyone to make sure they're a good fit.
It would, yeah. So that's why what I'm doing right now is unless I'm unsure. So for most people, I say no, but for the ones I say yes, I'm not doing a call. If they want to do a call with me, they're welcome. But I'm just letting them in, and then the first month is mutually like it's a test month. Like if they want to leave, they'll refund them. And if we don't think they're a fit, we'll kick them and refund them. So we're doing it that way. And then if there's someone I'm just not 100% about, then I'll go on a call. But I'm trying to limit my amount of calls, obviously, because I'm running VAE and that's my priority. But yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it at the moment.
And what kind of, you might have mentioned this already, but what kind of like characteristics are you looking for in terms of people who are going to join?
So the main one is authenticity. If I feel like people are not being themselves and like putting on an act or like anything like that, I hate it. I just kick them. that's one thing I really don't like. I like evidence of drive. So like one of my friends who I led into the community is a super early founder, hasn't raised anything. Actually, I gave him $5,000 his only first check. But he was homeless as a kid. He started off wealthy, but then became homeless and like went through a ton of shit. And I know that because I grew up with him. So like I saw that, and like to me that's a really like that's a proof that your drive is there. I think I've done the same thing with like staying through VAE and like not giving up on it over the years. I think like stuff like that is to me evidence that somebody has high levels of willpower and they're like not like a wannabe entrepreneur. So I love bringing in people like that. I love bringing in authentic people. I think technical ability is nice, but it's not a requirement. Like I'm not technical. I think it's a good add-on, but it's definitely below the personality factors. So I try to test for those, and then obviously if I don't have a call with someone, they're new, and I let them in, and then I like it seems like they're not a fit. I really don't mind just kicking them and refunding them. It's not about the monetization for me. It's about a really good, group of founders, and the money is really just to put on good events for those founders. Like I'm not gonna take a salary or anything from it.
Got it. And then would you have in person, or do you already have in person meetups, or are people just so scattered that it's hard to do that?
No, I don't think in-person meetups will be a thing for a while. Like I think we're primarily digital first, and we're only like, a couple weeks old. But
Yeah.
I'm talking with the founder of Inception, John Whaley, who's like a 10-year Stanford comp sci professor, raised $200 million for his between his last two startups. And he has a in-person one in like the Bay Area. So if we end up like linking up with them or whatever, I'm open to like that sort of thing. But I think the main thing is just monthly live pitches to VCs and eventually monthly top founder AMAs, like with the founder of Netflix or whoever. I think those are really high value events. And I think one of the key things with communities like this is you don't want to inundate your community with a bunch of like low impact events because then they just become inactive. It's better to have like monthly or even less frequent events that are very high impact, and then just keep the Discord as sort of like a passive space where people can like network and talk with each other.
Yep, that makes sense. And just last question I have for you. So we've talked a little bit about joining a founder community. We've talked about using LinkedIn. Are there any other ways to, I guess, network that you would recommend, or are those really the two main ones?
Um, I think the most important thing is to talk to people in your industry and to look for people that have succeeded already as an early employee or founder in your industry. I think like I really think a good mentor is like the most important thing because they have so many like not only that is like because one if you get them on other investors will be way more willing to invest in you if you're trying to fundraise, but then also like in terms of connections and like experience, like if they were there from the start they could help you with so much. You have to obviously take everything with a grain of salt because every company is different even if they're really adjacent. But I think that's like trying your best to find that perfect fit mentor is probably the most valuable thing you can do. And the way to speed run that is to network with other founders who have like, even if they're not like exit or older or whatever, like not a mentor, as long as they're like relatively in your industry but not competitive, and you can get like a small check from them, they're a little bit ahead of you, then that can help a lot in finding a mentor. So I think those two things are the most important.
Cool. Well, I think that's it in terms of questions I have, unless there's any other last things you wanted to, I don't know, promote or try to pitch that you wanted to go on the podcast.
No, I'm good. This is cool though. It's fun. I think let me know when you do this and then like how you're gonna do it because it'd be cool to post clips places.
All right. I guess we can kind of start off with like the elephant in the room, which is he was saying that gamers are better CEOs than athletes. So like I don't know what's the proper term for gamers, like but anyway, he was talking about from like a strategic standpoint, not having to also rely on genetic factors, and then I guess his overall approach is that they are the perfect personality for becoming a CEO. So I thought that was kind of, I know initially we were like, oh, that's a funny take, but what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, that was the first thing I wanted to talk about too. I was gonna basically ask you like, what do you think, or how do you think sports have benefited you in terms of this venture? I mean, I never played video games competitively, so I can't really speak on how it prepares you for life versus playing sports. But uh, I don't know. I think there's a lot more that goes into sports than just genetics, and it's pretty difficult to get to the top of the pyramid in sports, even if you are pretty darn athletic. So I think they're both difficult, probably like equally difficult, and both probably prepare you pretty well for being a founder.
Yeah, no, I'll concede there are definitely some attributes that present well when you're talking about translating it over to being a CEO or any other like position in the C-suite. But I think there's like a component that's kind of missing that you get when you play actual sports. I mean, that sounds bad. Not actual sports, but like physical sports. We'll just call it physical sports. And that's part of like being on a team. Now, I know that there are gamers who play on teams, and they have to operate together to complete a mission. But I feel like it's a bit different when it's in your face, like when you're actually having to physically overcome some adversity together and then strategize as a team in the moment. And there's a physical and mental element to it. So it's not just like you're going out there and robotically doing something. You're actually strategizing on the fly with real bullets flying,
Yeah.
depending on the sport. Like, you've got guys trying to hit you at a very high rate. You have to like understand a lot of things very quickly and be able to make those decisions, and then be able to own those decisions later because they're going to be scrutinized. So I think there's a lot of things that you just, and again, I didn't play games competitively. I play games just recreationally. I'll play Madden or whatever, or Call of Duty. But yeah, it's I feel like it's a bit different when you're actually in the fray, when it's something real and tangible. And that's why I believe it's important to play team sports. It's important to go out there and compete with each other, in a live and not simulated world, because you're going to be interacting in a live and not simulated world. So I think the translation is much more. I feel like team sports are much more appropriate when it comes to like the real values and things that you're going to utilize in the real world. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense. I don't know exactly how it works with gaming in terms of like how those, I know there are gaming teams, but I don't know if you're working together the same way that you are with kind of like team sports where there's egos, where there's certain leaders of the team, where there's chemistry between certain people on the team, things like that. I would guess that at least some of those aspects come into play in video games as well, but I'm not sure. But I agree with you. I think for me, playing team sports have been really beneficial for me in life in general, and then also in terms of starting this business. But I think one of the main things is just kind of like drive, competitiveness, being able to take feedback and put it into action, all that kind of stuff. Which I guess you could also get that kind of stuff from video games as well. So it's more about, I think, striving, working in a team, understanding how to lead and be led, things of that nature. And I could see that also being the case in video games as well. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying that if you play video games, you just don't kind of like get any kind of transferable skill set from that. I just think that sports, for sure, from my perspective, it is super helpful.
Yeah, no. I made sure to like, to lead with that there are some transferable skills that you get from playing video games that could potentially be very helpful in leading and running a company and making, strategic decisions, for a company. But I think like just the tangible world is where it really like, rubber meets the road, and where plans really like have to like be able to adapt on the fly. Kind of how Mike Tyson, I think, was quoted as saying like, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth, and you it's not in a simulated world where you're going to get hit. It's going to be in that real world, and that's going to show how you're really going to be able to adapt and overcome. So yeah, I think I'm still team live sports.
If I had to pick a side, I would pick live sports as well. But I think the reality is certain people just like I'm not good enough at video games to be a anywhere close to a professional video game player. And there's some people who are just not athletic enough to be anywhere close to being a professional athlete. So it's just like we got to pick what we're good at, try to be as good as we can, and then learn the lessons from that.
Yeah, no, that's a great political stance. So
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's a good takeaway on that.
Yeah.
But I figured we'd bring that up since that was like one of the things that we first like kind of like, when he said it. So
Yep. Another thing that he kind of mentioned is that their product is so different from anything that's on the market that there's a big educational aspect. So people are like, well, what is a caffeine spray? How does it work? How much do I spray on my tongue or in my mouth? How many times can I do this per day? All that kind of stuff. Do you think that our product is differentiated enough where we need to prioritize education, or do you think it's pretty basic what it does and it's not necessarily educating on this new product, but just educating on what our brand stands for and things like that?
I mean, I think there is a bit of education that's going to be a part of like our, our business model, because there's not a whole lot of multi-use shoes out there. And so I think people get the basics, they understand the fundamentals of shoes. And so we don't have to kind of like teach them how to wear it, or there's not going to be any kind of like component that's crazy and unrecognizable in terms of like how to like put the shoe on or take the shoe off. All that's going to be like self-explanatory. I think the main thing for us is to teach people like how broad the use is for this particular product. Like it's not something that you just like wear for some specific sport. It could be done or it could be worn across a plethora of sports. So I think that would be like one of our big educational pieces, and then just getting people like an understanding of our values and stuff like that. But I think that's kind of a little bit different than what you were asking. But that's still going to be a piece where we're going to have to make sure that consumers are aware and understanding and really can see things and have a good idea as to like what our vision is. So
Yeah. I think the way I think about it, the difference is Ori has to educate consumers basically on a new product category. So this idea of caffeine spray, and then he talked about potentially other types of sprays down the road. Whereas for us, it's the category is pretty established. People understand what shoes do, what shoes can do. It's just kind of educating on what this new product that we're coming out with, what it is, what it does. And then, like you were saying, education around the brand. So why do we start the brand? What are the values? What is our mission? What is our vision for the future? All that kind of stuff. So I think there's always going to be education when you're coming out with a new brand, especially if you feel like there's some kind of differentiation. But I don't think it'll be quite as difficult for us as it might be for Ori, just because people see a shoe and it's like, okay, multi-purpose, multi-use, that maybe you don't necessarily buy it right away, but it at least makes sense. You don't need a lot of explanation in terms of what that actually means.
yeah, no, I agree with that. And I know along the same line, he did mention that there might have been a couple of other brands that were out there doing like caffeine spray, but it was kind of like a brand play. So they weren't really focused on doing it well. It was more or less like a brand extension. And so they had a very like low dosage when it comes to like the amount of caffeine per spray. And it would require like, and again, I might be getting the numbers off, but like 30 sprays to equate to like one spray from the device that VAE, is that how it's pronounced? VAE Labs. Yeah. So to that particular product. So I think like having a competition is good, because it shows that there is some kind of need there. And I think we have a couple of shoes or a couple of brands that are similar to what we're trying to do. But again, I think what Orri was able to describe is how differentiated they were from those particular brands, and how their focus and their vision was a little bit different. So I think we can kind of like maybe utilize a bit of that mindset as we kind of like craft our own strategies.
Yep. And one other thing that we were just touching on a little bit is kind of expansion. So Ori was talking about different kind of like use cases for this spray bottle. So there's the caffeine spray. I think he mentioned cannabis or something like that. And it's essentially better for you because you don't have to smoke anything. And it's, I guess, like a steadier release. So in terms of expansion, I know we've talked about it a little bit, and I feel like I'm talking about expansion ideas all the time. But in terms of expansion for you, like what are you thinking about in terms of, let's say this first shoe is super successful, where would you want to go next?
I mean, I don't think I want to veer too far away right after the first shoe. and it would definitely be dependent upon the success or maybe lack thereof, if that's the case, of the shoe, before considering like brand extension into another type of product. So I think my idea would probably be based upon like what we get out of the testing. So if like we test this shoe and we find that it works very well on courts, turfs, and maybe like concrete or something, and then maybe not so well on another type of surface. This is something that I believe like we had in a conversation with Meg Bryan, like creating another type of shoe that like covers the other gap. So like we've gotten like, and I'm just going to use this as an example. We've gotten court sports and short turf covered, and then maybe we find another shoe that like covers like longer grass, higher grass, and maybe another surface that I'm not even thinking about right now. So perhaps that would be like the extension that I would talk about in the near term, or I think about in the near term. But then long term, I think it's some of the stuff that we've been kind of like ideating about when it comes to like equipment, and even like experience. Like I think the experience is something that could be marketable, something that could be beneficial. So I think those are what I think about when I think about extension for us right now, brand extension.
Yeah, related to the point around kind of like filling that gap and a shoe for another surface. One of the things
Mhm.
we heard, this was about a week ago at this point. We were interviewing for this REI program, basically for underrepresented founders. And one of the interviewers mentioned that in the hiking space, trail running, outdoors space, there's not really a lot of products that are specifically designed for kids. And there's an opportunity to create some kind of like multi-purpose outdoor shoe for
Yeah.
kids. So that product probably has to be a bit more durable. Maybe it has to come up a little bit higher on the ankle, things like that. Maybe the tread pattern has to be a bit different. So I think that's an interesting expansion idea, and that's something that we would look into. I think you're right, that would have to be close to what we already do. So some kind of shoes, and then focusing on multi-purpose use. And also, like you said, it's just about understanding what's really needed in the market. So we'd want to go through a similar process to what we did with this first idea of doing market research, understanding the market size, talking to potential customers, understanding how customers are currently kind of like dealing with the issue that we identify, and then trying to basically create a solution that is makes the kids' life easier, makes the parents' life easier, and encourages kids to spend more time outside, be more active, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the hiking like that's like a natural extension. I feel like that's something that we, going back to one of the examples that we talked about in like the marketing class that we had back in booth, and like how there are some extensions that just make sense, and then there are some that just like don't make any sense at all, and like how did they get past like the drawing board. And I think about like that the Colgate, the toothpaste, and they made like microwavable dinners, which is just like, yeah, how did you even let that get past like the drawing board? But yeah, I think the hiking shoe kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Yeah, that's a weird brand extension. It almost feels like it's fake, you know?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
makes
no,
no sense.
yeah, I would think that like, this is something that somebody's just like, this is a prank or something. Look around and make sure that I'm not on YouTube or something. So
Yep. One of the other things that Ori was talking about a little bit was just retail and getting into retail, and how bodegas are kind of a really good spot for his product to be in, because it's more of kind of like an impulse purchase or something that you just buy when you're already in a store. I know we've talked a little bit about retail and potentially retailers, but where's your head at in terms of retailers, like the ideal retailer for us?
yeah, I mean, I definitely think this is where we kind of differ a whole lot. Because we talked to Buddy's Gum, and like those impulse buy products are, they're going to be a bit different when it comes to like strategizing and coming up with a good retail partner. For us, I feel like it's got to be someone who can deliver our story um just as well as we can. So someone that makes sense when we think about like brand extension, like it's got to be natural, it's got to be a good fit. And so you see retail partners like a Dick's or an REI that make kind of, make a lot of sense because their story really connects with what we're trying to do as well. So they are about sports, or they're about going out and exploring. And those are things that really are, central to our branding strategy, to our vision. So I think as I look at retail partners, that's one of the like the baseline things. Do they is there a cohesion there? And then the next would be it'd be a numbers thing at that point. What's the cost going to be? Like, how much are they going to want? And is a bunch of different variables in there that will determine whether or not the relationship will actually work.
Yeah, and so I know, well, I don't know her personally, but there's this other footwear brand that I'm aware of. It's called Moolah Kicks, and it's basically basketball shoes designed specifically for women's feet. And I'm connected with the founder on LinkedIn, and I see her posts from time to time. I see a lot of people post about the success of her company, all that kind of stuff. And I knew that her shoes were sold in Dick's Sporting Goods. So whenever I go to Dick's, I just go basically around the store, go to the basketball section and try to find them. And there's certain kind of photos that I saw on social media, I think of maybe a store in like New York where there's a really nice display where it looked like there were employees around the display explaining the shoes to people, things like that. But then in suburban Michigan, where I am now, it's really hard to find them. There's not a lot of, it's at like the end of the aisle. There's not really a women's basketball section. And it's hard to tell that that's a different brand versus the Nike or Adidas, whatever is next to it. So one of the things that I'm just a bit wary of is signing a deal like that. Maybe in like one location, they are really good about education, featuring the brand, things like that. But then in other stores, they just kind of bury the brand and make it much harder to sell the product. So that's just another thing that I think we have to think about. And we've talked about some bigger retailers. So Dick's Sporting Goods, for example, REI, um, a retailer out on the West Coast called WSS. But
Mhm.
one of the things that we should also think about is more like independent retailers. So independent shoe stores, independent kids shoe stores. Um, Maybe it's not, the same level of foot traffic, but the people who come in there are probably buying kid shoes, right? Like if you're going into a kid shoe store, you're probably going to buy kid shoes. Whereas in Dick's Sporting Goods, maybe like 25, 40, 50% of the people in there are going to get kids products. So maybe that's one way where we can get in a bit easier. Maybe the terms are a little bit better. Maybe we can do some trials before really committing. And maybe that's a way to kind of test our retail strategy out before pursuing one of these bigger retailers.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. I would rather have a smaller footprint when it comes to retail, that's more concentrated and more focused on like our vision and being able to tell that story, as opposed to having like a really large footprint and end up being like, who is this? What, like, what is this? How is this different? Um, so I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Even like kind of bypassing some bigger retailers in favor of like a small independent, because they do a much better job of telling the story.
And just before we got on, we were talking a little bit about um some of the students that Ori had kind of used to get some things done. You want to talk a little bit just about some of the students that we've been able to interact with, engage with, and who have helped us out on our journey?
Yeah, I think I'll start with like Wisconsin's consulting club, and I thought that was I think it was your idea to kind of reach out to a couple of different like universities and their business schools, and try to bring them on board as we were trying to do. Like, I think at the time we were really focused on customer discovery. So we were really trying to validate the idea, really home in on some of these pain points that we wanted to address, and really get an idea and understanding of like the market. And they did a pretty good job of providing like market research, providing like case studies, and then also they were a resource for customer discovery, like getting a chance to get in front of more people, talk to parents, talk to
former competitive athletes, about issues that were that they were experiencing when it came to like footwear, specific footwear for sports. And so I think that was very useful. And now we've kind of grown with them. This is our third year with them. And I think we can both attest to like how they developed. And like, even though we're kind of working with a different group, there's a little bit of continuity because the guys who are like the team lead are now like presiding over the entire program. And they're kind of like handpicking and making sure that the group kind of really understands what we're trying to accomplish. And so they've been very, very useful. And we've seen like the information and the data that they've been able to provide, and the case studies just get even more in depth and better, and really high fidelity products that they're presenting. So I think that's been a real major takeaway, and trying to figure out how to continue to better leverage this group, because a lot of energy, a lot of ideas. Just sitting in the meeting this past week, they were super enthusiastic about things, and just making sure that we were able to harness that and kind of like point it in the right direction. I know Orri kind of mentioned like what they were doing with UCLA and MIT and in terms of testing and stuff like that. This is obviously a kid's product, so I don't know how much we could get them involved in that aspect of it, but there are other ways in which you want to use them. And then just like not necessarily universities, but like just the students who've kind of reached out. So we have an intern right now, college student out here, Colorado, just kind of doing like, I would say like the odds and ends, like doing various different like tasks. And it's been cool to kind of like be able to, in a sense, kind of give back a little bit while at the same time providing that experience and that exposure. We ended up having another college student reached out to us and want to help out with the marketing. So I think that was kind of cool too. So just allowing access to, a different, I won't say like a super different generation, but another generation and their ideas and their experiences, and bringing those to the table is really cool. So I really concur with a lot that Orri said in terms of being able to like really like work with student groups and utilize them. So I don't know, what are your opinions, thoughts on student groups?
No, I think that was a good summary. The only thing I would add is, and Orri was mentioning this too, he doesn't really have any employees and he tries to run things lean. So that's kind of been our approach as well. But getting a chance to work with some of these different student groups or individual students, it's been almost like a first taste of what it's like to manage a team or manage employees. And it's just been good to understand like, okay, we have to be super clear in the direction we're giving. If we want to see a certain output, we have to be very clear in terms of what that output is, because if it's a bit ambiguous, then it can go in a lot of different directions, and you can think that what you're saying is super clear, but in reality it's not. And it's just about like figuring out, okay, what are the best tasks to give this specific person based on what they're interested, what they're good at. And that's just a bit of a learning process, but I think we're getting better at basically seeing what they can do and then figuring out what's the best way for us to utilize that in order to do something that is beneficial for us. So like you were mentioning before, some of these like case studies on different companies, different kind of like footwear companies, for example, we've had them do case studies on different Kickstarter campaigns, breaking down some of the numbers, breaking down basically the different rewards that some of those companies were offering in exchange for donations. And then also something that we're thinking about now is social media. So we're both kind of aged out of the TikTok generation, right? So we don't know a ton about what's going down on TikTok. So they're pretty good for understanding like, what are the trends on TikTok, Instagram, what are brands doing, what are good things that brands do, what are bad things that brands do, and then how can we start to think about what our strategy should be on those different social media platforms, so we can start to build a little bit of a following even before we launch, because that's just basically free advertising.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I know we can jump into like the Kickstarter and the Indiegogo portions of the conversation, but before we go there, this one topic that just we can't escape. I feel like we always talk about it. Maybe like every episode at least once, at least a little bit. And it goes to like subscription. And Orri of VAE Labs has like he said that their focus has been like on the subscribers really, because they're the ones who kind of stuck through thick and thin back when the formula was super bitter and terrible, and up until now, like continuing through like bottles that leaked or whatever it might have been. They've been able to kind of stick with them and been able to like get feedback from them and create like a better product because of them. What are your thoughts about like having and we've kind of pushed away from subscription, but like having like how to build like this loyal following and strategies in order to like make sure that we're continuing to communicate with like our early adapters or people who are part of like our core. And I don't know if subscription is the way of doing it, but like what are your thoughts about like an approach that helps us like really utilize our community?
I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head. So we talked to the guy who basically helped launch the on 100% recyclable shoe that's only offered on subscription. And I actually saw a guy on LinkedIn post about that the other day. And I was just going through the comments, reading them because I was curious to see what people thought. Some people were really really supportive of the idea. Other people were like, I don't know if this makes sense for a running shoe, but if this were some kind of like Air Force One, for example, then I'd be really interested in it. And then other people were like, so I can't even own the shoe. I pay $20 a month and I can't even own the shoe. What kind of sense does that make? Instead of a subscription, just give me a discount on the next version that I buy or whatever. And that's something that I know you've talked about specifically in the past. So I think maybe that's the way we do it, incentivizing people to continue to buy by giving them discounts if they come back, or maybe it's something with how we interact with parents and their kids in terms of digital assets that we provide or something like that that just keeps them around. I don't know if I have a good answer on that yet, but I just think it's hard to do a subscription for a shoe right out of the gate.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So I don't think subscription is probably the way of doing it, but in like that same type of like vein, like being able to continually like have those lines of communication open so that the consumer doesn't feel like they're just being like sold to or whatever, and not there's no relationship there. It's just like whatever, like they're building these products, they're selling it to me, and that's just the gist of it. There was a podcast episode that you sent me. I don't even remember the name of it, but anyway, it was about a founder of August, and she was talking about utilizing Discord. And then Orri, he mentioned Discord as well as like a way to like get, I guess, deposits when you're talking about a Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign. But then he also mentioned it as a way to like just keep those lines of communication open. And so maybe having some type of platform that you give to people like I know I've used this moniker before, like worldie originals, like people who are like really like our advocates, and give them an avenue or a channel in which they can like communicate and they can actually see some of the changes that they've been wanting to implement. I know I've said this before, but like making like even our website a bit more interactive, like allowing people who actually go to the website to not just look and get information, but able to like kind of give information in a sense, so they can respond to polls or whatever like tool or interactive tool that we decide to kind of like put in there. But I think it's like important, especially early on, to get people talking and to keep it as a dialogue, to get that conversation going so that we get a better understanding of like what are people's thoughts regarding the product, and then they can get a better understanding of what our vision is and like how they want to and how we plan on implementing the feedback that they're getting from them to address a lot of the pain points that it's evident. So I think that might be a better way or a better approach than trying to get people subscribed to a certain thing that they have no clue or feel like they might not have any say on. So
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
I guess we can jump into like the Indiegogo and Kickstarter strategy. I know you asked him a question about like what were his strategies or what were VAE Labs strategy when it came to the crowdfunding. And then he kind of mentioned having, and this is something that's not new to us, but like having some kind of like what equated to soft commitments. Like he was saying, like even if it's just like $1 or something like that, he saw that people who made that type of commitment would be more apt to actually like follow through with actually contributing to the campaign. So I know we're trying to get our strategy together. I don't know, what's the best way? Do you feel like using the Discord, using Slack, making that type of group? I still don't know. I listened back to the conversation, how they were getting deposits through Discord.
Me neither. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing I don't quite understand, because with at least the way that I understand it with Kickstarter, if you release some kind of early bird reward, you can limit how many people can get it, but I don't think you can limit specifically who can get it, right? So if you put these people in a Discord and say, we're going to give you this early bird reward, make them pay $1, but then once you publish it, if it goes before all of them can actually buy it, I don't necessarily know how you make that right for the person who joined the Discord group wanting to get the early bird reward and then missed out on it.
Yeah, I don't know the connection between that unless there's some kind of back channel linked in kind of situation in which you can.
But one of the things that I was thinking about, and I can't remember if I mentioned this, but this is somewhat of a recent thought. Because there's people who reach out to me, I'm not sure if it's the same with you, but there's people who reach out to me and they're like, it's basically, as soon as this is available, I want to be notified because I want to buy it.
Yeah.
So if we just gather a list of all those people, put them into a Discord group, Facebook group, whatever it is, email chain, and then essentially when we launch the campaign, we send them the link. Like ahead of time, we say, hey, we're going to have this early bird reward. It's only going to be there probably for like an hour. This is when we're going to launch the campaign. Since you guys have been supporting us basically since day one, we're letting you guys know about this. We're not going to really advertise the campaign until maybe 30 minutes after it's live or whatever it is, just to give you guys that opportunity to get those early bird rewards. So maybe that's one way to do it. But other than that, I'm not sure if there's an easy way to do it without, like you were saying, some kind of back channel.
Yeah, no, I have no idea. Maybe we should have have him expound upon that a little bit. But I agree. Like having that would make it, make for probably a more successful campaign, because all we've heard, including from Orri, is that like if you were able to exceed your goal within the shortest amount of time, then you end up getting those people who are on the fence, those bandwagon backers or whatever, and that's kind of pivotal when it comes to like the success or reaching those goals, whether it be like your actual goal, the identifiable goal that's on the site, or the stretch goals that you might have and maybe not publicize as much. But yeah, I agree. Let's see what other big topic. Oh yeah. I thought it was kind of sticking with the Kickstarter thing. I obviously they used Indiegogo, but he was saying they would have been more successful had they not. This is what, in essence, is what he said. They would have been more successful if they had not gotten that $10,000 video.
Yeah.
Because that video didn't really mesh with Indiegogo, and they got me thinking about two things, like making sure that we've seen enough videos of successful campaigns to know like what really works, and then two, not spending so much, like really being lean about it, but at the same time you still want a good like video, because that's going to be, from what we've heard, the driving force behind a lot of campaigns when it comes to, especially when it comes to backers who don't know who you are. But yeah, I thought that was kind of like a different take. Like, had we not had a nice video, or now I'm really paraphrasing, but had we not spent $10,000 on this type of video, we would have likely been more successful. I don't know if that was a question, if that was just like a point that I thought was interesting.
No, I agree, because that's something that we've heard. We heard that from someone else as well, that basically they overspent on the video and it really wasn't able to be repurposed for anything after the Kickstarter, because they talked about Kickstarter a bunch in the video. There's like incomplete shoes and stuff like that. So that stuff resonates on Kickstarter because people are naturally like wanting to see the process. They understand that it's not complete, but when you actually just have your website up and running, if you make it seem like the product isn't finished, then that's going to kind of erode some of the confidence and people are probably not going to want to buy. So that's something that I've thought about. Like, if we really want to invest in the video, we probably want to make it in a way where we can continue to use it after the Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
And if we can't, then we should just basically do it as cheaply as we can while still basically hitting on all the things that we wanted to hit on. And I mean, even like iPhone videos, I have an iPhone 14, maybe.
Yeah, I think I have the same. Pretty good videos.
The video is so good that I can't even send videos. If I record a video over like 30 seconds, I can't send it because it's just too big. So I have to I end up having to basically turn the quality way down if I want to ever send it out. So I think even with like an iPhone, if you get someone who's talented and if we have a pretty good understanding of what we want the video to say, and we get all the props right and things like that, then we can get it done for maybe a couple $1,000, maybe even less.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's what we should really like be targeting. Not one of these huge, like, I mean, I say huge, but like one of these big companies that like churn out these videos for Kickstarters and stuff. I think we should be looking at kind of doing it as cheaply, but still as effectively as possible. So,
yep. I have a couple more points if you want me to ask some of mine now too.
Yeah. Jump in. No, this is a free for all.
So Orri, I don't know if are you connected with Orri on LinkedIn?
I just connected like maybe a couple hours ago.
Okay. Yeah, he posts a lot about accelerators and VCs, and he has some kind of like strong opinions there. So I know we talked very, very briefly to someone who could have connected us to Techstars, but the guy didn't want to talk to us yet because we were too early.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on accelerators and whether that makes sense for us or not?
I mean, I think it does make sense. I mean, we've obviously applied to an accelerator, but I think it makes sense for us. And kind of going back to what Orri said during our conversation with them, he ended up getting a whole lot of traction coming out of their accelerator. So I think they did an accelerator down in Austin, Texas, and he was able to just utilize that time to really connect with a bunch of, and this is when they were looking for funding. So a bunch of like VCs and other type of investors, and really get themselves in a position to where they can actually, be somewhat successful with their launch. So I think it's important when you're thinking of fundraising, because it gives you a little bit of like runway. And then it also gives you, depending on your accelerator program, access to this network that can be beneficial when it comes to investment dollars coming in the door. So I think in that regard, like it's pretty like important for us. I think it's exactly what we were kind of talking to the REI interviewers about. It's a chance to like increase our network. And this is another thing that Orri just was like hitting on. Like he said it maybe 3 or 4 times in the conversation, just networking with other founders, networking with other people in the industry, all that. Like he says, his one thing that he wished that he would have done was to just start increasing his network sooner. And I think that's what an accelerator program, the real benefit for us is that it gives us a chance to just increase our network, hopefully exponentially, because you get access to the accelerator program connections. And then just like by way of being affiliated with this particular program, you lend a little bit more credibility to your cause, and people are more inclined to want to come and talk to you. So I think that's like the biggest thing, more than the money, even though the money's obviously important. I think more than that is the relationships that you can kind of get by being a part of one of these accelerator programs.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's the network really that is beneficial, and the feedback on the business plan, things like that. So like you said, I actually forgot about some of those accelerator programs that we had applied to in the past, and I'd be open to doing them in the future. But I think we're almost getting to a point where, like, let's say we launch in early 2024 and we just get a bunch of traction, then at that point, it's almost like it doesn't even make sense to do an accelerator anymore. If anything, it would make sense to just try to get VC investment. So I'm open to it, but I feel like the window is kind of closing a little bit.
Yeah, we're definitely graduating out of that stage relatively quickly, but I still think there's some time. And again, even if it's not like something that we're doing because of like wanting to be funded or whatever it is, I think like having that opportunity to like be able to partner with these, with the companies that are running these programs is pretty big. So I don't know if I would decline it even if we had a bunch of traction and we found like an accelerator program that really kind of made sense because of like the potential connections that it could provide. I think we would still, it would still make sense to kind of go out and like make that happen. But no, I agree. Like in terms of like the funding, if we get traction and stuff like that, if the focus is funding, then it might be better at that point to just kind of like cut out the middleman and go straight to the VCs.
Yep. And then just last point that I wanted to ask you about. So Ori was kind of saying that I think he met an investor at the gym just randomly.
Yeah.
Um,
6'8".
yeah, exactly. 6'8" guy. Yeah. And we've met a lot of people because basically we started off with no connections in the industry, and now we know a decent amount of people, right? So do you have just maybe like one connection or one story that stands out in terms of just like a serendipitous like serendipitous networking event where somehow like we met someone through some random person or random event that we attended, anything like that?
I mean, recently I attended like some Denver Startup Week and then also like some founders like get together, and did run into a couple of people, specifically one that was a tech background and kind of offered to help build out an application or some kind of technical aspect of our business model that we're still kind of having the works when it comes to like foot scanning and things like that. But that might have been like in terms of like live connections, but there have been some like serendipitous like connections that I felt like, oh wow, I was tracking this guy and then all of a sudden you've connected. Like I think back to like Dave Coben, like I was like looking him up for a long time and just like, yeah, not even, because this was back when we were really focused on subscription and trying to do something like that. And I was kind of, I think I maybe have mentioned him, and then months later, or at least, yeah, at least months later, you kind of like come back with this connection, like, oh yeah, we're gonna talk to Dave. I'm like, oh wow, that's that's crazy. Or, and the last one that I'll use is I can't even remember his name, a guy from Taft. I had listened to his podcast a while back, and or an episode of the Stitch Down, and he was on that particular episode, and I was like, oh, this is a really cool dude. Like that was one of his story kind of went to heart. I was like, oh, that's super cool. He kind of started like in socks or whatever, and eventually navigated to making custom or customizable boots. And I thought that was super cool. And then the fact that he ended up like liking or responding to one of your posts on LinkedIn, and then we've been able to connect, and potentially he might become a guest on our own podcast. I thought that was super cool. So there's been a bunch. That's just a few.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That last one is the one I was going to say, because I actually forgot about kind of like how serendipitous that was. But I remember you talking about him like a decent amount, and I never knew who it was. I can't remember if you said the company or the name, but I remember not really knowing specifically who it was. And then I remember this guy, I made this post on LinkedIn about Shark Tank, and it got a lot of traction. And he posted on it, and I looked at his profile. I'm like, oh, Taft's, like I've heard of that company. He seems like a pretty successful guy. I think he might have commented on another one of my posts. Then I connected with him, reached out, and he said he's willing to talk with us. So I thought that was just funny that of all the people to, find one of my posts and like write a pretty long comment. I thought that was kind of funny. And then I feel like I've told this story a million times. I don't know if I've done it on the podcast or not, but Meg and Brian, our footwear design and branding agency, they've been like super, super helpful for us. And I feel like that's one of the best connections that we've made. And Brian just like randomly reached out to me on LinkedIn to the point where I was like, who is this guy? Is this legit? Like, I guess I'll take a meeting with him, but I really don't know who this is. But he was just kind of like, yeah, I see what you guys are doing. It's pretty cool. We like working with brands like you guys. Are you willing to just have a conversation with us? And, we had a conversation with them, liked them a lot, and they've done a lot for us, including a new logo, some branding ideas, a lot of really good thoughts on how to improve this first shoe that we're putting out. So that one always feels like super serendipitous, because I don't even know what post or posts he saw on LinkedIn that made him want to reach out. But I kind of think like, if I hadn't made that post that he saw, where would we be right now? Like, would we have another person doing kind of like similar stuff? Would we just maybe be stalling out a little bit in terms of progress, things like that? So those kind of stories just make me kind of motivate me to continue to do everything that we're doing, be public about what we're doing, post on LinkedIn, go to different networking events, continue to reach out to people, talk to as many people as we can, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I forget about, a lot of these relationships and how they started, but they definitely have been the bread and butter behind like how we've been able to get to this point. So no, I think that's huge. Meg Brian, that's another huge relationship that was garnered just maybe serendipitously. So
Yep.
what was your I guess like one going back to like the Orri conversation, and maybe this will be, we're kind of reaching towards the end. What was like your one major like takeaway, if you're like maybe something that he said or maybe something that you thought about based upon like the conversation that we were having or the topic that we were discussing?
It's difficult. There's not one thing that's coming to my head, but based on what I know about Orri, I think he's pretty similar to us in the sense that like he doesn't necessarily have a background in what he's doing. But he's just like, he knows his customer really well. He works really hard. He surrounds himself with the right people. He networks hard, and he's confident in his ability to get things done. So I view him as a guy who's similar to us, who's just a little bit further down the road. So I think, hopefully we'll be where he is a couple years from now. And yeah, I mean, I just think he's similar guy to us, who's just a little bit further down the road in his entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, it's one of those questions that people ask when they already have their answer in mind. But yeah, I guess my major takeaway from that conversation was something that he kind of said, and I won't say it was like offhand, but it was just part of like a bigger topic that he was discussing. But he said like adjusting your brand with your vision in mind, with the vision in mind. So like making adjustments with the vision in mind. And I think about like how many times, I mean, not how many times, but like our major pivot. And then as we like kind of work with our brand and massage out like our vision with Meg, Brian, and the team, um, always making those type of adjustments with our eye on our core values. And I think that's like something that we've done, but it kind of resonated with me that that's how we should always like make our decisions. That's how we should always make any kind of adjustments, is with like that vision with our core beliefs in mind. So that was my big takeaway. A lot of good things came out of that conversation, but that was one that kind of like spoke to me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think vision is super, super important.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, I think that's all I have on it.
Me too.
Sweet. Well, another successful Monday morning quarterback episode.
Yep, another one in the books.
All right, man.